Join us today as we share videos from the vault, special presentations, past interviews, and share with you the A.R.E. through the ages.
Gladys became Edgar Cayce's personal secretary in 1923 when she was 18 years old. And she continued as his secretary until 1945 when he died. And just last year we celebrated Gladys's 60th year in the work. And for those of you who were there on that occasion, you know that probably no one in the country could draw such an audience as this lady did on that occasion, literally from all over the world. So Gladys probably has the distinction and perhaps the opportunity, or to have had the privilege, of knowing Edgar Cayce for a longer period of time and more intimately in terms of his work than anyone else. So she is well qualified to share with us the answers and some comments to some of those questions that we all have about Edgar Cayce. So let me get started, Gladys, by just asking, how did you meet Edgar Cayce? How did you happen to come in contact with him? And then secondly, what were your first impressions of the man?
Well, I met him, I think, around 1922. It was about a year before I went to work for him. My sister was in Hugh Lynn Cayce's class at school, grade school, and they were good friends, and I met Hugh Lynn before I met Mr. Cayce, and my sister had, he would come home with her. I remember seeing him walk her home with, you know, swinging her books, you know, in the afternoon, and my sister had started to Sunday school at the First Christian Church where the Cayces attended, and she was in with Hugh Lynn and a lot of other young people. They were in Mr. Cayce's Christian Endeavor group, Young Christian Endeavor, Junior Christian Endeavorers. And they went on to a convention of the Christian Endeavor Society in Birmingham, and Mr. and Ms. Cayce took this group, and my sister was among them, and I went to the train, I walked her to the train, which was about 3 blocks from our house, with my father, and met Mr. and Ms. Cayce then. And I had met Mr. L.B. Cayce before that up at the studio, had a picture made, and I had, when a friend of mine, a girlfriend of mine, had mentioned Mr. Cayce giving readings, I thought she was talking about Mr. L.B. Cayce.
L.B. was his father.
Yes. And I didn't know that he was the one until 1923, a year later. And an older woman who worked where I did had borrowed me. I was a stenographer at a tissue hardware company, a wholesale and retail store. It was sort of like our Rose's department stores here. It had everything in it. This one had a little corner grocery out there. You could buy all kinds of things there, and you could buy your lunch if you wanted to, and then it had a dry goods department, and then I was in an office in the middle of this building, and I did the stenographic work for about 3 men who were. I was in the office of the office manager, who was the accountant for the organization, and they sold plows and all kinds of farm machinery, and had salesmen going out. And Miss Willie Graham this lady was in charge of the Chinaware department, and she had borrowed me from the office 2 or 3 times to go with her to a hotel room where a salesman was demonstrating Chinaware, and had me take down the story of the Chinaware pattern and type it up so she could make copies of it and give it to, had me make copies of it that she could give to her customers. And I remember this particular time, it was the story of the blue willow ware. And so I was, and she was, we all loved her. She was a sort of a mother type to all of the young people who were working in the store, and we'd go on picnics, you know, on our days off, our afternoons off. This was in the summer. It was in August 1923, and all the stores in Selma would close on Thursday afternoon through the summer. And
for an afternoon off.
Yeah, afternoon off, and we'd go on a picnic and out to Lake Lanier somewhere. And so I was planning to do that, but Miss Graham asked me if I would go with her to take down a reading she was having for her little afflicted nephew. It was in Birmingham with her brother and his wife. And so I hesitated, but finally I decided I'd do it. And so I went with her, and then when we got to the head of the steps of the studio, which was on the 2nd floor, right off the Broad Street there, it was catty-cornered across from Tisha Hardware. It was just had to walk across the street. And he met us at the top of the steps, and he had a mirror there that he could see people coming from, you know, up in so he met us at the top of the stairs, and took us in this little room, which was back of his dark room, and there were other people sitting there in the room, and he had a little cot that he sat on first and talked to us, and then lay down and started with the reading. And he was in his shirt sleeves, so he didn't have, the books all say he had loosened his collar and tie and all, but he didn't have one on that day. And he talked to us a while, and then he put his hands back of his head like this, you know, and lay there a few minutes just looking at the ceiling. And then he moved his hands down across his solar plexus this way, and I found out later, I mean, this was the procedure through the years, when his eyes began to flutter, you know, sort of like that, Mr. L.B., who conducted the reading, his father, would start to talk to him and give him the suggestion. And he would start breathing like this. His chest would go up and down like this, you know, sort of. Didn't make a noise like I did, but he would you know, his chest would rise like that, and then in a few minutes he would say, and Mr. L.B. gave him the suggestion for this boy, and his address, where he was and everything, and he said, yes, we have the body, and started on the reading. And I was so busy taking it down, I didn't, just hearing him, it was just like taking any other. I wasn't, so I remember once at a meeting in Florida with Nell Claremont, we were talking before a big study group there, I guess a combination of study groups that came to Tampa, I believe it was. And somebody asked me, weren't you awed by this, you know, the first time you saw it? And I said, no. I mean, it seemed perfectly natural. I didn't think it was odd or unusual. And Nell said, well, why should she be? Doesn't every boss man dictate to his stenographer lying on the couch asleep?
Or on his lap or something like that, too.
Oh, me. So I was asked afterwards to, I found out years later, I didn't know it until there was a book that came out saying I applied for this job, you know, that I answered an ad for the job, and I said to Hugh Lynn, how in the world did they get that idea? I mean, you know, I didn't apply for it, and he said, didn't you? You know, I mean, he thought, and he didn't even know. So
there were others in the room.
Others in the room, and I
job.
Found out later that they were there. They were trying out for the job, and Mr. Cayce used to say, you know, that I've made the best copy of anybody, and reading. And it wasn't until I felt real good about that. And years later, I thought, well, my goodness, how did he know? He didn't even hear the reading. He couldn't tell whether it was better or not, you know.
He didn't hear the original.
No. Yeah. So then I was asked to make, Miss Graham told me that I was to make 2 copies of it, and see, this was a Thursday afternoon, and I mean late, and after work, and so I came on back to work Friday morning, and a girlfriend down the street who she was so interested in this, she wanted to come herself, you know, but I didn't have any. I couldn't ask her to come, you know. So, but she helped me transcribe some of the, helped me, I read my notes to her, and she helped me with the spelling of some of the words I'd never heard of, like dorsals and cervicals and something other, and it mentioned some kind of machine, iconoclast or something like that. Anyway, I can give you the case number of that reading if you want to see it, the first one I took down. And so she was very excited about it. And so I went back to work Friday morning and typed off the reading, made 2 copies. And I must not have been very busy that morning. But often I had, when I didn't have anything else to do, I wrote personal letters. I wrote a lot of personal letters at work. So I did that, I guess, without anybody knowing it. They didn't pay any attention to me. I mean, when I was typing, I guess. I had so many bosses, I didn't know. Anyway, at lunchtime, she took the copies up to Mr. Cayce, I mean, 1 copy up to him. And when she came back from lunch, she came in and said, Mr. Cayce told me to ask you to think about coming to work for him, and if you're interested, come up and see him. And she says, I think you should do it. And so I never had a doubt. I knew I wanted to do it. I was bored, you know. I think the year before that I was just restless, and I felt like something was. I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what, you know. And
so Gladys, you took the job.
I did.
And that was the beginning of this long relationship.
Right.
What was your impression of Edgar Cayce, the person, not in trance, when you first met him?
I liked him. I liked him immediately. I felt comfortable with him. I think it was because I had never really had an adult man especially talk to me, well, like I was an equal, really. I mean, you know, instead of talking down to me, I mean, he seemed real actually interested in me as a person, you know. Found out he was that way with everybody, so it wasn't anything unusual for him. But I knew I wanted to do it, and one of the things he said to me when I told him I would, he says, well, remember, Miss Gladys, I think that was the day I went to work, the first day I went to work, he said, I went back and gave notice, a 2 weeks notice, and so it was 2 weeks later that I went to work for him on September 10th, 1923, And he said to me one of the first things, now Miss Gladys, he always called me Miss Gladys, not just Gladys, Miss Gladys. Remember, you'll be working with me, not for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was the way it was.
Gladys, Edgar Cayce, when he gave a reading, didn't remember what he said.
No, no.
Was he immediately interested in it right after? That is, you would type
no,
it up.
He didn't,
was he eager to read it? And,
he
and
didn't.
know about it?
He didn't show any interest in reading it. It was only after we began to get the life readings in Dayton, which was that same year in the fall, in November, that he would get Mrs. Cayce to read aloud the reading and discuss it. But he hardly ever read one himself. Sometimes people, later years, some people would want him to go over their reading with them, and they would come and talk to him and ask him about certain things, you know.
So he gave a lot of readings that he actually never did.
Oh yes, oh yes, he never did. He would just listen to what people told him about them.
Well, those who listened to the readings must have been quite astounded at some of the material that came through.
Yes, yes.
What was your impression? I know this was not only just initially, but over the years. What is and was your impression of the source of the information? Where did it come from?
Well, I didn't know. I think I didn't worry about it. I just accepted it. So many things I didn't understand. I guess I didn't know this was so unusual, you know. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it, but a lot of things I hadn't seen before. And as it, I mean, through the years, we were inspired by the readings. I mean, all of us close in the family there. And we'd listen to a reading and it would just give us courage and new hope and everything. Well, Mr. Cayce didn't have that, you see. He didn't hear the readings. But he would only know what we told him. He'd ask, did you get a good reading or whatever? And then if something exciting was in it, we'd tell him about it. I mean, something that he...
So he wasn't benefiting personally as well as those,
no,
as much as
no.
those around him.
We would constantly, and through the work readings especially, we'd get a reading on the work and it would encourage us. And the study group readings when they started, they were just full of encouragement and, you know, just helping you to understand yourself and be a better person and do what you were supposed to do in this incarnation.
His own relationship to the source of his information was sort of generalized, wasn't it? That is, he didn't consider himself a medium, for example.
No,
he wasn't.
No.
He didn't have spirit guides.
No, no, he didn't.
He had direct contact with some source.
Yes, and he believed that that it was God-given. No, he wouldn't have stayed with it. I mean, he lived on the what people told him, you know, how they'd been helped, and that made it worthwhile.
Now, he really felt as a young person sort of like a freak, didn't he? I think he even used that term.
Yes, he did. He said when he was growing
freakish.
up, a young man in his teens, and he was called a freak, and you know, and he began to feel like one because he was different. And it wasn't until years later that when people began to get help from the readings and you know, give credence to them, that he began to get help from just hearing them tell how they had been helped by a reading. And also, when the first life reading came out, I mean, the first mention of reincarnation, I think that intrigued him. And maybe it sparked recognition in him of the fact of reincarnation. I don't know, but he
did finally become comfortable
yes,
with what
yes,
he was doing.
He did, and he began to see it in the Bible too. I mean, there were many references in the Bible that you could interpret that way, and then we began to get life readings that mentioned Bible characters. You know, that people who had been Bible characters. So it was.
Gladys, why don't we pursue that just a moment about the introduction of the reincarnation? That must have been very dramatic, and
yes,
it was in Dayton, Ohio.
In Dayton, Ohio. Well, when I had been with Mr. Cayce about, well, it was less than a month. I mean, it was about 3 weeks maybe, when Arthur Lammers came to Selma. He was a man from Dayton who had been interested with a lot of other people in the oil well business, and he, I think, had been trying to make money in oil wells to save his business, which was the Dayton Photo Products Company, and
it was Lammers' reading in which this was first mentioned.
Yes, yes, and Ms. Cayce, he took Mr. Cayce back to Dayton with him, and so he asked Ms. Cayce to read to me the old readings they had. They had copies of only about 600 readings that were in a cardboard box, alphabetical box by name, filed under that.
Now, there were many readings given before that were
yes,
not
there's no
recorded,
copies. I mean, the old days in Kentucky, see, he gave the first one on himself in 1901, I believe it was, when he got his voice back, or 1902 or something like that.
And it was 22 years later, actually, when you began to write them.
Yes, right. And they were, he would borrow a stenographer from the bank there in Selma, who would come over after hours, you know, after the bank closed. She'd come over and take the readings, and a lot of people, different ones, took them down.
Now, were you there when in Ohio when the first the Lammers reading was given?
No. Mr. Cayce left with Mr. Lammers, and Mrs. Cayce was asked to give me experience with the readings, to read these old copies to me and let me take them down, just to keep me busy, I guess. And so I did that, and then after that we talked, and it was wonderful. She told me all about the family, her family and his, and how they've been sweethearts, you know, since they were in their teens and so on. And it was fascinating. And I used to love to read love stories, you know, all through my teens, and scared to death of boys, but I like love stories. Anyway.
Well, now Gladys has told me before that there was that she was terribly afraid of boys. That it was something karmic about it, but it was one she overcame early in life.
Right. Well, that was it was when I had my life reading that it mentioned that a fear of knives and a distrust of the opposite sex. But I'm getting ahead of the story about Arthur Lammers. Miss Cayce would get a letter from Mr. Cayce, and then she'd tell me what he said and everything. And one day she came to him and said, "Edgar wants us to move to Dayton," and said to ask you, "You want to come with us?" And I certainly did. I mean, no doubt in my mind. And so we went to Dayton, and when we got there, they had already gotten readings. One of them was Arthur Lammers, which mentioned, he asked Mr. Cayce, he was interested in astrology, and he asked Mr. Cayce if he would give him an astrology reading. Well, it was in this reading that mentioned certain characteristics of him, you know, and then it made this statement, like a side remark. He said, "You see, he was a monk once."
He was a monk?
A monk once. And so we, excuse me, they were getting readings. No, I don't know what's the matter with my throat. I took a little slippery elm thing. That ought to help that.
So So it was mentioned that he was a monk, implying that this was in a
yes,
former life.
and so then they had other readings to find out who they were. You know, I mean, Edgar Cayce had a reading. I mean, it had a reading on the group. Arthur Lammers and Lyndon Sawyer and George Clingan Smith, who was a young man there from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. There were 4 or 5 of them, that main group, and these readings were taken down by Mrs. Rosenberg, who was, her husband was interested. They were, and some of them by Mr. Lammer's wife, I think, and typed up. We have some of those copies. But in this reading about the group, it said that they had been associated in the Trojan period, I believe, for destructive purposes, and should work together constructively this time.
Destructive of other people, or other?
Well, they, instead of gaining in soul development, they lost in that period. And so that's what, and they had started getting readings on, it's in that group under 3744 series, all these questions asked about astrology and about dreams, and it was in that answer to that question, it said not enough attention is paid to dreams. You know, it would be better for everybody to, you know, study the dreams and so on. So this is what we went into, and
what was Edgar Cayce's reaction
well,
to this?
I think he was fascinated, really, but he wasn't sure that it was, you know, he wasn't sure that it was right. He just questioned it. But still, when we got there, he was telling us about this, and so he began getting readings for the members of his family. He got one for Gertrude and one for little Edgar Evans, who was 5 years old, and he got one for Hugh Lynn, who was in Selma, had stayed in Selma to finish out the school year, and Hugh Lynn, I heard him on the lecture platform tell about how horrified he was when he came to Dayton, and he was given the life reading for his Christmas present. He read all these things, you know, and he didn't know this was going on. No, and he said to Mr. Cayce, he said, "Well, Dad, that's not what you taught us in Sunday school." Then he gave me a life reading, offered to give me one. It was very unusual for him to offer to give anybody a reading, but I saw it happen several times. He, you know, and he felt he'd like to see a reading on somebody. And
could we focus, Gladys, for a moment on your life reading?
Yes,
and tell us something about what it contained.
Yes, it was. It said some wonderful things in it that have certainly come true. One of them was, one who with others will draw many of the more beautiful things of the earth plane about them. Well, that has certainly been true. It's happened. It's happened, and all of you are part of it. Everybody in the work. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing. And when people asked me about how I reacted to I didn't. It was just all new to me, and I was given the 8th life reading, the 8th one that he had given, and the only thing that that I knew was true was that he said that that I had a distrust of the opposite sex from the French incarnation. I think that was what it was from, and that had a fear of knives and cutting instruments from the Persian period, when I had, it said, for in that manner the bodily destruction came. Well, later in other readings we gave a reading on him and all the rest of us who had been associated in that period, it said that that I was wounded by the sword and lingered, you know, suffering. And so I knew those two things were true, because I would never have a date with a boy by myself, you know, and I'd go with a girlfriend, you know, have a double date, get her date to bring somebody, you know. And that went on for quite a bit. Never was very satisfactory. I didn't want to be alone with one. And then once in a talk where people were asking me about it, I said I've long since overcome the distrust of the opposite sex, but I still have a fear of knives and cutting.
Well, you still have time to work on that. But
another thing it said in my reading was that I had been in Atlantis, in that great continent of Pisidia that was disappeared under the sea 10,000 years ago. And then a side remark, he said the entity will be here, you see, when the earth changes again, not physically.
Not physically.
So I don't know, that meant, I guess, not in this physical body, maybe, you know.
Gladys, tell us about a physical reading. Now, you had physical readings.
A lot of them.
Could you give us an example of a physical reading?
Yes, the first, I believe I had the life reading first, and then the physical. I was having trouble with headaches, and I was wearing glasses. I had had glasses for about 2 years, and the doctor prescribed these glasses for the eye strain. I had been working under a skylight, you know, and they had an awning, a colored awning with, and I'd sit there at my desk and this, doing like this all over my desk, you know, the shadow of it, and didn't think anything about it. Just did it. And I guess that's what caused this. I mean, my eyes were hurting, and I had trouble with them. So he said to wear these glasses, you know, just all the time. So I was having headaches up there in Dayton, and so Mr. Cayce offered to give me a reading, and so right off he said that take off the glasses, you know, you don't need them, and that it was caused from poor circulation and from poor, he said, mostly from poor posture. Sit up straight, you know, leaning over my work. And I've tried to pay attention to that through the years since. And there was an intimation that I might someday have to have glasses, but it wasn't anytime soon anyway. And so and it gave me the head and neck exercise, and using the violet ray around my neck and down this, you know, the shoulder, between the shoulders and so on, and which I did. And my eyes, I mean, the headache stopped immediately when I took the glasses off. And I mean, through the years I had a lot of physical readings, but that was remarkable. And I didn't have to wear glasses until I was, I guess I was in my late 40s, really, when I had to, because I was farsighted, which the reading mentioned, and mentioned the left eye being weaker than the right. And Lyndon Stroyer was having trouble with his eyes, and he had a reading about the same time, and it pointed out that I had far stigmatism, and he had, what's the other one now? Near, you know, he was nearsighted while I was farsighted physically.
Gladys, what is the most impressive physical reading that you remember? Now that's kind of a tough question of all the thousands you recorded, but does one particular reading come to mind that was especially impressive?
One physical reading, I remember going to the dentist, and he said that he'd never seen anybody with worse tonsils than I had. It was just awful. You know, you need to get it taken out, and sooner the better, and so forth. And so I had a reading for that, and the reading said that the tonsils were there for a purpose, and they, you know, should not be taken out. And he said it might someday be necessary, but not now. And they were there, you know, they were needed in the body, like a, well, like a wastebasket. I mean, the poisons went through the tonsils, you know, to be eliminated. And so it wasn't until after we moved to Virginia Beach, I mean, just about 2 or 3 years before Mr. Cayce died, I was in the late 30s. I was having trouble, and he said that time to take out the tonsils now. They'd done their job, you know, take them out. So I went to Dr. Walter Taylor, who took them out right in his office, you know, with a local anesthetic. Never had any problem at all.
Gladys, Edgar Cayce was taunted some during his lifetime. He had bad press occasionally. He was arrested in New York and again in Detroit.
Right.
Could you tell us about some of those days? He was accused of practicing medicine without a license, I believe.
And that was in Detroit.
In Detroit. What do you remember about those days? They must have been very discouraging and traumatic.
They were. Especially, I've just gotten through copying some of this information on the Detroit case, and I think that was harder on him than the New York one, because in New York, the people gathered around us. We had so many friends and members up there, and they gathered around, and we stayed in the hotel there for an extra week or 2 weeks or something for the trial to come, and we had all these friends, and you know.
So he was brought to trial in New York. In New
York, and in Detroit, we had good friends too. I mean, if we hadn't, we would have been in jail, I guess. Stayed in jail. We'd only there about an hour, I guess.
But you said we. Did you go to jail also? The whole
yes,
group?
Yes. Mr. and Mrs. Cayce and I, in New York, were all three arrested, and but we didn't get in jail. We didn't get put on the mat as empty, whatever. Anyway, we got out on bail or something, and before we got in jail. And Hugh Lynn was back in Virginia Beach when that happened. Atlanta University was still going, and he was a librarian there, and they, you know, it was still hanging on. This was in 1931, November 1931. And in Detroit, it was just we had the Dillmans and the Wachowskis and the Weingardens, 3 families there that just got us out immediately. We were, and but we had to. They let us come home. Though we came home and waited till about March to have the trial.
What was the charge in
Detroit? In Detroit, it was practicing medicine without a license.
And in New York, it was a different
fortune telling.
Which was against the law in New York.
Yeah. And we had the police women came in the hotel and stayed for about a week, I guess, and kept bothering Mr. Cayce trying to get an appointment, you know, and we were getting ready to leave that late that afternoon. We were coming back to Virginia Beach, and he decided he would give them the reading, and so they just immediately, when the reading was over, why they had the police waiting outside, you know, and they came in and arrested us.
Now, did he consider at that time stopping giving the readings? Or
No, he didn't. He didn't consider stopping, because I mean, people rallied around and assured him, you know, that he, you know, he shouldn't stop. And he was vindicated too in the New York. You know, they didn't find him or anything, but in Detroit they did. In Detroit, it was in the reading. We had a reading on it, and it said that he was technically guilty of doing that, which was against the law. Although the man accused him of doing treatments, well, he didn't do any treatment. You see, he just recommended what to do. But anyway, they were very helpful. I mean, all of the people involved. We had good lawyers, and we have a whole on both of those instances. We have the whole record.
So he was vindicated in each case, and went on with it.
Yes, and it was on the trip back from that in March. It was March 3rd, I believe, that Hugh Lynn went with Mr. Cayce back to Detroit for the trial, and see, this happened in November. Both of them happened in the New York and the Detroit. Both happened in November. Isn't that interesting? I hadn't thought of that before. Mm-hmm. And so we were allowed to come home, and then Mr. Cayce had to go back for the trial. They just held one of us, you see, with him, and so they let him come home and delayed the trial until March, and Hugh Lynn went with him, and we didn't have a transcript of that whole procedure until 1972. One of our members went and got a copy of the whole thing and sent it to Hugh Lynn, and
so we have the transcript of that
trial?
Yeah,
both of them, the New York and it's in with that reading, which I just finished doing. We read that reading last Tuesday, but behind that in the library, and I've just made it available for the people who have a book, is that whole thing, you know, with these people reporting, you know, like Charlie Dillman, Mr. Wachowski, and Mr. Weingarten, who had all had readings, and you know, they answered the questions they've asked.
Gladys, in 1942, There Is a River was published, and Tom Shigrew had actually lived with the family, hadn't he?
Yes, for 2 years.
For 2 years.
And he'd been there off and on, I mean, since let's see, he was in school, 1930, 27, I think, 1927, when he came home from Washington Lee with Hugh Lynn.
Yeah, now he was a classmate of Hugh Lynn's at Washington Lee,
yes,
and
yes.
lived with the family a while, and then wrote There Is a River.
Yes.
Which is still, many people feel, the best biography
I think it is.
of Cayce by far.
Yes.
What was the impact of the publication of There Is a River? What effect did it have on the work?
It was a good impact. There Is a River, and I think maybe if that article, Miracle Man of Virginia Beach, hadn't come out in the Coronet magazine in September of 1943, I mean, things might have been different. But because There Is a River brought a lot of people into the work, but it brought them with an understanding of what it was all about, you know, while this Coronet article was pointing up, I mean, just the miracle after miracle, you know, and all you had to do was to call up Virginia Beach and get an appointment, you know, and talk to his secretary and get an appointment and so on. And he was just deluged.
So it raised expectations dramatically around the country.
Right. And it just, Mr. Cayce just couldn't cope with it. I mean, he had appointments 2 years in advance when he died. And people had sent in their membership. And we had finally stopped when he got ill in late August, and he couldn't, went away to rest, and we just stopped making appointments. At that late date, we stopped making them.
And after he died, I understand that you had to actually
return that money.
I
think there was about $13,000 in the bank from these, and
advance payment on these readings.
Yes, and they had appointments 2 years in advance, and
now in order to try to serve these people, who were many of them waiting and some were desperate, he began to give more readings.
He doubled up on the readings. He wouldn't give readings, he still stuck to the 2 readings a day most of the time. Sometimes he'd do a third one. But he would double up and get, instead of getting 1 reading, devoting the whole time to one person, he'd get 5 or 6 or more. I think one time we had 7 or 8 or something like that. It was just awful.
And the readings began to get a little shorter at that period.
Yes, yes. It was sort
more.
of brief everything instead of going into great detail. And yet some of those readings were just as helpful as some of the long ones were. Some of the, I mean, we still have members that came in at that late date and got help.
Now, he was told in a reading, I understand, that he should not double up.
Yes.
That he should not give more than the 2. Yes.
Well, he had been, when he was so busy, he would fill up Sundays, you know, and so Mrs. Cayce and I just reneged. We just made him stop doing it on Sunday, and he stopped that. But I remember her pleading with him, and he says, well, I've got to, he would pour over this correspondence. Hugh Lynn was overseas, you know, Ed Gavin's overseas. If Hugh Lynn had been home, I think he could have handled it, because Mr. Cayce would trust him and let him talk to these people and you know, and answer them and make the appointments and all that. But he was trying to do it all himself, and there's bags of mail just coming in, and he'd sit and pour over these letters, telling, and he felt sorry for the people, you know, they would complain about the condition they were in, and this, that, and other. And she said, she just begged him, she says, you've just got to stop this. And he says, oh, I can't, I've got to help these people, they, you know, just got to. And she says, well, Edgar, if you keep on like you're going, pretty soon you won't be able to help anybody. And he said, I know it, but I'll just keep on as long as I can, and then I'll be through. And that's what he did.
Did Edgar Cayce follow the general health principles of the readings? Did he take care of his health?
He didn't. He would follow the readings for himself a while, but he wasn't consistent in it. You know, he would. And toward the end there, the last. I think one of the things that he was told to get osteopathic treatments. He had a stricture in the side, in the intestines from an appendix operation, which was where the intestines were all twisted around the appendix or something. And they had to operate, and there was, you know, he had trouble all his life with that afterwards, and he would get readings and follow them and be helped by them, but he wasn't consistent about using. And the final check reading he had, not the final one, but along in the late summer of 1944, he was told to have, I think, 3 osteopathic treatments a week and do these packs and a lot of things he was to do. Well, it was the war years, and we didn't have gas, to go and come. And besides, if he had gone into Norfolk, we had no osteopath in Virginia Beach. If he'd gone into Norfolk 3 times a week, it would take up at least a half a day, to go and come, even if we could get gas. And he just couldn't do that. I mean, he wouldn't be able to give the readings, you see. So he decided he'd try to keep up with the readings.
How long before his death did he stop giving readings?
In late August, I think he probably wouldn't have stopped then, except he realized that he, I think, had a slight stroke, because he had been pecking out letters on his little portable typewriter that Ed Givens bought for him when he went to work. And he would answer all of his personal letters on that, but the other letters he would dictate. And he got so he couldn't use his hand. One hand was, he couldn't use it to type.
He was 67 at that
67.
67 at that point.
Yeah. And so he realized that, and everybody pleading with him to go and rest. And Dr. Henry George he was an osteopath from Wilmington, Delaware. He had come to the Congress that year, and he told him he just had to rest and he had to get away. And so they asked in a reading where to go, and the reading suggested Roanoke. And Mr. Cayce had been up there and liked it. And so they went to Roanoke and drove to Roanoke and stayed in a hotel there. And then he got into the hands of a doctor there who, we all felt just went off a tangent. Instead of following the readings on him, why he had his own system of treating him, and we didn't know that he was not following the reading. We thought he was.
Gladys, what were the circumstances of Edgar Cayce's death? That is, was he able to say some final things to people who were close to him?
Well, I didn't tell you about in February of 1944, he went to Florida to visit Tom Shagru, and that was supposed to be a vacation, and it was. He enjoyed it, but he took cold. He had something like the flu, I guess, and a pneumonia, and his heart was enlarged. The reading even mentioned that, and Dr. Woodhouse, who was an old-time physician, a wonderful man, and a good friend of Mr. Cayce, he would come and see him, and he said he was telling Mr. Cayce about this new drug that called what was that? Somebody. For goodness sakes, what is that drug?
Some antibiotic of
yes,
some kind.
Yes. What is that first thing that came out like that they gave to everybody? Sulfa drug. And he said that it seemed to work with some people, and so Mr. Cayce decided to try it, and Dr. Woodhouse admitted later that it wasn't good. It was harmful rather than helpful, in his condition. And he had, and Dr. Henry George, who came down to see him, he came to see him in Roanoke and then also in Virginia Beach after he came back in November, and he had us. He said if he won't come to the hospital, he tried to get him to come to Wilmington, where he could keep him in the hospital and have him all the treatments and everything. But he didn't want to go. And so he said to me, if we can't take him to the hospital, we'll have to bring a hospital to him. So we got a hospital bed and everything that and then Dr. George and Dr. Woodhouse called in Dr. Taylor, Dr. Waller Taylor, who was Sally Cayce's brother. And so the three of them, they put their heads together, and of course they did everything they could. But
how did he feel about the work toward the end of his life? Did he feel that the readings had given adequate guidance for the continuation of it? Did he have any particular aspirations for his future?
I don't think he worried about that too much. I remember one time him saying to Hugh Lynn was always anxious to get on with the research, you know, and we were trying to index the readings, not knowing how, and we were putting them on cards with a little sentence out of a reading, you know, something like that, and trying to index under. It wasn't until later that we had the people show us how to do it. That when Remington Rand came and showed us. But anyway, Mr. Cayce was irritated about that. He says, well, you can do that after I'm gone, he said. Do that after he didn't. He just put his mind away from that. That was not his problem.
Gladys, what was Edgar Cayce's greatest contribution to the world? I know he's had a tremendous impact on your life and on all of our lives. What is your first thought in terms of his impact? What is his greatest contribution?
Well, I can think, I've said, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest thing he gave to me, I think, was the realization that we are responsible for our own destiny, you might say. I mean, we are all, and the close relationship that I have with God, or the understanding I have of Jesus, and he just made the Bible come alive for me, personally and also through the readings. Just an understanding of life that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I think he's done the same thing for a lot of people.
Sure. That's a marvelous statement to close with as our tape comes to an end. And all of us who know you recognize that you have in abundance all of those characteristics which we attribute to mature souls, and gentleness and long-suffering and patience, particularly long-suffering.
Oh, let me tell you, one of the first sentences in my life reading, it says, a goodly soul and rather old, you see.
That's right. And then finally, that unending capacity to love. So thank you, Gladys, and will you join me in expressing our appreciation? You're marvelous.
The ability to start healing a problem is as close as our everyday thoughts. It's all in how you choose to look at things. How can our views affect our attitudes? Find out next as we learn how changing your mind can change your life. The 21st century, the beginning of a new era. We stand at the threshold of a time filled with rapid change, uncertainty, and monumental possibilities. Visionaries have pointed to this time as a turning point for humanity. One such man was the American clairvoyant Edgar Cayce. From holistic healing to spiritual development, the world that Edgar Cayce predicted is now emerging, inviting us to explore the new millennium.
Within the human soul lives the power to heal and transform our lives. It's usually forgotten in the midst of a busy, demanding world that seems to pull us first one way, then another. That healing power comes from a unique human ability. We have the freedom and the skill to choose our attitudes and emotions, our point of view and feeling about any situation. I'm Mark Thurston. I'm joined today by Tom Baker, psychotherapist and counselor. Tom specializes in personal change from a spiritual point of view. Welcome to the program, Tom.
Thank you, Mark.
Healing is a word that is usually associated with the physical body. In what sense can we talk about healing attitudes and emotions?
Well, when the body heals, it returns to a state of natural harmony with the laws of nature. When attitudes heal, they return to a natural sense of how God views us. It's like we get to know ourselves the way God knows us always.
Now, is there a simple way of distinguishing between an attitude and an emotion?
Yes. An attitude is how we think about ourselves, how we explain ourselves and our lives to ourselves and often to others. An emotion is how we react to that attitude.
Well, one emotion that so many of us wrestle with from time to time is fear. Are there
Absolutely.
particular attitudes that seem to cultivate or bring fear on?
I think of them. I think of 5 of them. One is I'm helpless. That means there's nothing I can do to control my destiny. That often leads to depression and finally despair. Then I have only the past. That attitude gets worse as we get older, because then we have only our past, and then we go into death. I am a victim of the world. This is an attitude that pervades our life today often, that things are too complicated, things are overwhelming, can't do anything about it. Then life and people are dangerous. This is an attitude that causes us to be isolated. It's a world of car alarms, burglar alarms, and high fences. Then finally there's the attitude that I'm basically bad. This is a granddaddy of all fearful attitudes. We've all got it. It's somewhere deep in our hearts, the fear that something's wrong with us. All our spiritual masters have addressed this attitude. Jesus with forgiveness, Buddha with compassion, Muhammad with the sense of that the individual is a very good person.
That is quite a list, and if we look at daily life, there's so many factors that seem to push us in those directions. People come to counselors like you. Could you share an example of somebody who was successfully able to work with an attitude or emotion?
Yes. I had a man came to me, and his 2 main attitudes were that he was bad and that all he had was the past. When he challenged those attitudes and practiced new attitudes, one, that he was good and that he was a spiritual being, his life changed completely. He started committing himself to relationships, and so much of his anger started to float away. He's a hospice worker today.
Do you think he was surprised by what he was able to accomplish?
He was astonished. He said it. He said, I never knew that I thought these things about myself. He was keying on his feelings, but not on the attitudes behind them.
So he found kind of a key for unlocking that healing process in his mind.
Yes, yes.
Let's talk about the resources that people have to draw upon to help affect a healing at a mental level.
Okay, the resources are old and new. The external resources that we think about are the wisdom traditions of world religions, Christianity, the Bible, Buddhism, the sutras, Taoism, what's that called? The I Ching, I think, yes. Jesus was one of the great attitudinal healers, and he healed through forgiveness and had amazing results physically. So the 4 Gospels is a wonderful resource. In a more modern sense, the Edgar Cayce readings and the Course in Miracles.
Now, all those are exterior wisdom traditions. What about internal resources for healing attitudes and emotions?
They're better. They're better, and they're accessible to all of us. We have deep within us an intuitive conviction that we're innocent, that we're eternal, and that we are absolutely good. Now, we have to turn in, we have to go into ourselves to hear those things. But we also have to speak to ourselves. One thing you can do, anybody can do it. They can say to themselves, intone this, I am good. I am basically good.
It's a great affirmation. Changing your attitudes involves shifting what you pay attention to in the world going on around you and in the inner world of your memories, emotions, and desires. Attitudes shape what stands out, what's important as you look at life.
Our attitudes shape our lives. We are who we are because of what we think. Unfortunately, this creative power of the mind is often expressed in limiting negative ways. Worry, frustration, resentment. They become the source of many of our problems and challenges. But attitudes, new, more positive ones, can be the starting point for solutions. The American clairvoyant Edgar Cayce was one of the first people of the modern era to propose a spiritual psychology. His teachings and advice to thousands of troubled people always emphasized that to change your life, you must first change your attitude. Change your perspective, and a new world of possibilities can open up. See the glass as half full instead of half empty. Our attitudes become our outlook on life, and there are always options for how to see a situation. Just as in one moment your point of view might see a picture of two dark faces, by shifting your attention about what stands out, you could instead see a white goblet. A new attitude is simply a new way of looking at things, leaving room for your mind to be appreciative, or hopeful, or optimistic. In Cayce's spiritual psychology, the human mind is the builder and creator of our personal experiences. Unfortunately, that creative power is usually squandered as we let fear, doubt, and guilt shape how we feel about ourselves and other people. But the way to unlock mental healing is not as simple as suppressing every negative state of mind. Our anger especially needs to be understood and creatively directed. As Cayce put it, a person who doesn't have the ability to get angry isn't worth much, but the person who can't control his anger is worth even less. That ability to control and direct our attitudes and emotions depends upon having a central value for one's life, what Cayce's spiritual psychology called an ideal. Having a core value is the starting point for transforming a limiting attitude into a new frame of mind.
Well, hi, welcome back to the Edgar Cayce Foundation Archives. We've talked a lot these past few times that we've been together about how we preserve all of the historical materials in the Edgar Cayce Foundation's collections. And so now I want to go one step further and talk about, why we're preserving this material, all the different uses that we have for this. And so I'm going to ask you all to put on your historian hats and come with me and look at the collection from the original Cayce Hospital and the Association of National Investigators. So this was the organization that was formed in 1927 before the A.R.E. was started. And they were dedicated to both studying Edgar Cayce's work as well as running the Cayce Hospital. And so these are all resources that Gladys Davis saved after the hospital was closed in 1930. And this can tell us a whole lot about the reasoning behind the hospital's founding, the day-to-day activities, the staff, what the hospital looked like, how it was run. And so this is basically the raw material from which the historical record is made. So we're going to start with this booklet right here. Now this is one of the informational booklets about Edgar Cayce's work that was published by A.R.E. And so we can see there's a lot of notations here. Now I know from experience just working in the archive that this is Gladys Davis's handwriting. And so she did an excellent job in giving us a lot of further supplemental information that we can use to learn more about the A.R.E. So she wrote down handily that this was published in 1926. There's actually not a copyright page in this booklet, so it's good that she let us know that that was the date that they published this, and they did publish it locally in Norfolk. She's written the reports of readings that mention this booklet, so 4905-53, down here as well, another notation, as well as notations down here. And she also let us know that it was reprinted in 1932. They did a second print run, and also in 1937 they used it in the booklet called What I Believe, which was a set of essays by Edgar Cayce they had published. So she also saved an application form as well. You could send in, you had to be a member of A.R.E. to be able to have a stay at the hospital. And so you would fill this form out as well. She's dated it January 1930. And on the back it has conditions necessary to obtain best results from a reading, Mr. Cayce. So things to keep in mind before your reading is given to you. And, you know, through the years, as Gladys was processing all of this information, any other background information she would tuck into whatever she was working on. And so this page probably dates from the 70s, as well as she was going through all the publications. So anything else she had, she would, you know, type up and put with the correct material. All right, we've also got an original brochure from the opening of the hospital. So this was part of, you know, the marketing materials. So this would be given to people interested in Edgar Cayce's work, interested in going to the hospital for treatment. So this would tell them what kind of treatment they would receive, what the hospital was like. And so we're going to open up, take a look inside. We've got the Cayce Hospital of Research and Enlightenment, Virginia Beach, Virginia, owned and operated by Association of National Investigators for its members. And we have that motto here, that we may make manifest our love for God and man, the same motto that is above the door in the visitor center today on A.R.E.'s campus. So I've got a nice portrait of Mr. Cayce. So it begins with giving an overview of where the hospital is, the environment around it. That was really important at the time for people when they were choosing an institution to go to for their health. I've seen this also in college bulletins at the time. They're very interested in what the air quality was like, what region of the country it was in. So they're very much emphasizing that this is, you know, right next to the beach and how helpful it would be to someone taking treatment here. And we've got this wonderful artist rendering of the hospital building. And if you've seen pictures of our campus or you've visited us, you know that the hospital building is that green color, which when it was renovated, we based the current color on the original color here. And you can see this is a really pretty manicured looking lawn that they've got going on. It's a tiny bit of wishful thinking, because at the time it was mostly sand dunes, and you can see here on this photograph. And it really, you know, shows how really sparsely built up the beach was at this time in the late 1920s. So you've got the Cavalier Hotel down the beach, this direction, right? And there really wasn't much else between the Cavalier and the hospital. And so Virginia Beach, originally a very, very small fishing hamlet, basically. And so it really got built up over time, especially during the mid-20th century. So we've got a lot of great interior shots of the hospital. See, we've got a solarium here. Plenty of sunlight. Different areas. So we've got living room and dining room. Now this is now the entrance to the spa up in the hospital building presently. And we have Gray's Kitchen, the restaurant here, and it's actually located behind this wall where these two double doors are now. And they have photos of the bedrooms you could stay in. There was different rates actually if you had a beach-facing bedroom or a forest-facing bedroom. And the library and lecture hall. The founders of the hospital, including Morton Blumenthal, would give lectures on topics from the Cayce material on Sunday afternoons. And there's also a library that they're very interested in building up, and that would also be used by Atlantic University when it was founded around the same time. And Edgar's son, Hewlin, when he graduated from college in 1930, came back and became AU's librarian for a short time. So it tells us, you know, who were the staff of the hospital. Dr. House leading the staff here. A lot of descriptions of the neighborhood around the region, how to get to the hospital as well, you know, travel arrangements. And this is where the labyrinth is presently, the campus. Originally, it was just the walkway, and then here would be a fountain, and we've got a fountain there right now, but the original fountain was actually dedicated to Edgar Cayce's mother, Carrie. She had passed away in 1926, and so that was a memorial to her. Keeping with the architectural theme, I found this pretty recently. We actually have the color scheme for the interior of the hospital originally. So they asked Taylor System of Color Harmony up in New York City, which I think was very fitting for them to choose a company that was very interested in, you know, what are the best colors and the best colors that work together to be the most healing environment the hospital to have. And so that's really, really neat that we have those original color chips that they were using in the design. We also have the dedication address when the hospital was opened. A great photo there, the outside. And it was held on Armistice Day of November 11th, 1928. So Armistice Day being the date of the end of the First World War. And it has transcriptions of all the different talks that were given at the day. See that Mr. Edgar Cayce did the prayer and also a talk. Address of welcome by Morton Blumenthal, and then the main address by William Moseley Brown, who is the president of Atlantic University. So this gives us a great idea of who the different people involved in the work at this time, all their views on what they were doing and their purposes and stuff like that. And we have more promotional material, which tells us they were really interested in reaching out to the local community and seeing if they could drum up support there. So we've got these wonderful printed flyers from the time. And Gladys's notes, telling us when things are published. And something I find really interesting, we also have the inventory of the hospital. And so when the hospital closed in 1930, Morton and Edwin Blumenthal's lawyers and their accountant came by to, collect all the accounts, all the information of the property. And so we actually have a copy of the inventory. And this is really important because it gives us, exactly what the interior looked like, all the different pieces of furniture, all the equipment, what color things were. So you could really create this whole, illustration of what it was actually like. And this goes on for several pages, it tells you what everything cost and what the floor plan, how it was laid out. So really a very important document to have. And finally, a bit of organizational information. We have all of the proxy voting forms for the board of the hospital. So if you could not attend the board meeting in Virginia Beach, you would appoint a proxy to vote for you. And so we have all of these forms from all the board meetings from 1927 until 1930. So all of these records, they're all pieces of a puzzle. And so you take all of these, and this gives you a great idea of what the hospital was all about, its purposes, its activities, who was involved, down to the paint color inside the rooms. And so this is all, raw materials of history that we are so lucky to have here in the archive. It gives us a wonderful, bird's eye view into our history and where we came from. And so I hope you've really enjoyed, putting on your historian's hat and kind of exploring all of the, wonderful information that we have preserved here in the archive. Now we'll be doing a lot of these activities leading up to July. We're celebrating the 90th anniversary of A.R.E. this year. So I'm very excited to be sharing with you a lot more of these really wonderful examples of our history. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to put them all down in the comments. I'd love to answer them for you. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.
And when the morning stars sang together, and the whispering winds brought the news of the coming of man's indwelling, of the Spirit of the Creator, became the living soul. This entity came into being.
He has been called the sleeping prophet and the greatest psychic of all time. From holistic health to predictions about our future, the Cayce material covers all aspects of life. Hundreds of books have explored his amazing talent. Are you looking for a new direction or answers to life's many questions? Find out how the Edgar Cayce information can help you with a better understanding of the body-mind-spirit connection, the oneness of God, and the meaning of life.
Hello, I'm John Van Auken, one of the directors here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the A.R.E. Have you ever wondered whether there is more to life? Do you know your soul's unique purpose and reason for being on the earth at this time? Our organization was founded in 1931 to help answer these very questions and to help individuals like you discover a depth that adds meaning to your life.
Edgar Cayce has been called the sleeping prophet and the father of holistic medicine. As a child, he was able to memorize the pages of a book simply by sleeping on it. For more than 40 years, Cayce gave psychic readings to thousands of people while in an unconscious state, diagnosing illnesses and revealing details of their past and future. Many of his readings dealt with holistic health and the treatment of illnesses. He started the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment, or A.R.E., in Virginia Beach because he noticed his gift worked best near large bodies of water. Although Virginia Beach was just a small fishing town then, Cayce had a vision it would become a huge tourist attraction, and Norfolk would boast one of the largest shipyards and ports in the country. We now go to this center, which acts as the international headquarters of the A.R.E.
Edgar Cayce's dream was to be of help to people. Lots of times people in life, they get overwhelmed with their life, their relationships, with their job, and sometimes they have the thought, you know, isn't there more to life than this? And I think Edgar Cayce would suggest that in fact there is, that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. Edgar Cayce is the most documented psychic of all time. He lived between 1877 and 1945. For 43 years of his adult life, somehow he was able to put himself to sleep, close his eyes, and while asleep, he could be asked virtually any question imaginable. The name Edgar Cayce sometimes is much more prominent and famous throughout the world than it is here in Virginia Beach. I have been on planes all over the world. We have Edgar Cayce centers in 38 countries. We do programs around the world, and very often on a plane they'll say, "Where are you from?" I'll say, "Virginia Beach." "Ah, Edgar Cayce." Sometimes there's kind of like a misperception. Well, what's it all about? Is it some kind of a ghost researchers? Is it some kind of a religious movement? No, I usually tell people the best way to describe us is really as a self-help organization. Edgar Cayce provided a wealth of information for individuals, just like you and I, how we could maintain a better lifestyle, how we can take better care of our physical bodies, how we can learn to deal with our attitudes and emotions, how we can help transform our relationships. So the questions you have about your life are just like questions that people asked Edgar Cayce 70, 80, 90 years ago. And the answers to those questions came to be called readings. And they found that Edgar Cayce had an incredible accuracy rate. He could put himself to sleep here in Virginia Beach, tune into an individual virtually anywhere in the world, diagnose what was wrong with that person, how they had gotten ill to begin with, even sometimes recommend doctors for them to go to. And over the years, we kept track of all of Edgar Cayce's readings, his correspondence with people who had readings, and in fact, the Edgar Cayce database contains approximately 24 million words. And for that reason, Cayce has been called the most documented psychic of all time. Edgar Cayce was a Christian. He was a member of Protestant churches all his life. He taught Sunday school all his life. So at first, when some of this information started coming through him, he thought it was unusual. The ability to go to sleep and see another person at a distance, or the ability to put himself into a trance and answer questions about other different religions or history or whatever it might be. His reading of the Bible, where he saw the Old and New Testaments were filled with visions and dreams and people having experiences in consciousness, that gave him a tremendous sense of well-being, that somehow because of his tremendous faith he was able to do these things. The first publicity was really the New York Times in 1910. They ran a full-page spread about the illiterate man who became a doctor when hypnotized. He wasn't illiterate, but that was a better headline. But it was an amazing ability to somehow tune into someone at a distance. I would say that for many years he had essentially 2 readings a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And it wasn't really until 1942 when his biography, There Is a River, came out. It was really his life story. And people bought that book and became very interested. And then the following year, 1943, Coronet magazine published an article called The Miracle Man of Virginia Beach. And Coronet was really the life magazine of its day. And because of those 2 publications, the requests for reading became so frequent that Edgar Cayce told his secretary to book in advance in order to stay kept up with the demand. He was really worried about all these people. The postman was apparently delivering bags of mail each day. Eventually, Edgar Cayce wore himself out and had a stroke. And when he died, he had been booked 8 readings a day, 2 years in advance. So truly toward the end of his life, people realized that his gift was remarkable, and so many people wanted help. Edgar Cayce founded the A.R.E. in 1931 really as a membership/research organization where people could come and see what this material was all about. For example, I first became interested in A.R.E. because I had some really challenging problems with allergies. I used to get 6 allergy shots a week. And by working with the Cayce Information on Allergies, I don't even take pills anymore. It was also his desire where people would come and they would be able to get readings, and he would have a team of doctors, nurses, physiotherapists carrying out the treatment. Holistic health from Cayce's perspective is an approach to health that incorporates the whole person, the body, the mind, the emotions, and the spiritual beliefs of that individual. And so when Edgar Cayce gave a reading, a health reading, and we have copies of approximately 9,000 health readings, he would try to provide information and insight that would help that person on every level. He did not just draw upon alternatives to medicine. He drew upon every kind of medicine known to humankind. He recommends surgery, he recommends osteopathic adjustments, chiropractic adjustments, naturopathy, physical therapy, dietary changes. Anything that you can imagine was recommended by the Cayce material. And in fact, a group of physicians who became interested in holism because of the Edgar Cayce material really were the ones responsible for founding the American Holistic Medical Association in 1978. And today, the old Edgar Cayce Hospital has been transformed into our health center and spa. So people come here for massage, they come here for chiropractic adjustment, they come here for dietary advice, they come here for regression therapy. So in a sense, we are continuing Cayce's health tradition even today. We have the Cayce Riley School of Massage that trains people in massage therapy. I believe we've graduated about 2,100 different students from 18 different countries. If people have never been here and are hesitant to visit because they might think it might be unusual, we're just like a visitor center. You can walk in, you can explore the bookstore, you can go through the labyrinth, you can walk through our meditation gardens. It's a very open, wonderful place to visit. Tours come here all the time, and I think if you haven't been here before, you will really enjoy coming to visit Edgar Cayce's A.R.E.
Visit edgarcayce.org for more information and to gain access to resources on how to treat hundreds of ailments from acne to varicose veins.
Latent within you are talents, ancient wisdom, and all the answers to reaching your soul's full potential in this lifetime. For nearly 100 years, America's most amazing seer, Edgar Cayce, and the organization that grew from those early beginnings has been providing tools for personal empowerment and spiritual growth to its members. As members, you can explore issues of body, mind, and spirit within a community of like-minded people. Quarterly, we publish a mystery-revealing magazine titled Venture Inward. Members also have access to an exclusive online membership section with all 14,306 Edgar Cayce readings in a searchable database, plus background material such as letters, historical documents, and more. Plus, you'll enjoy hours of audio and video materials including recent events from Virginia Beach and special selections from the archives. We also maintain an extensive health database, online dream interpretation, and a free meditation course. Next, you're going to hear about the benefits from our members in their own words.
I grew up with a very religious, very strong religious foundation through my family, which is one of the many reasons that my spirituality has always been so important to me. It's also one of the reasons I was so thrilled to find out about the A.R.E. and Edgar Cayce's work. And my favorite part about being a member is the fact that I have access to all of those readings and any other spiritual material I could think of online.
I became a member of A.R.E. because the information that came through Edgar Cayce has changed my life, and it has helped me so much in my own personal struggles that I wanted to give something back, and I became a life member 2 years ago. Definitely, even just the stories of healing alone are worth investigating this information further.
I do use the members-only parts of the website. I use them for, in particular, health issues, the Edgar Cayce readings, and I like to look at Venture Inward magazine on the website. The information given has helped my spiritual path and spiritual growth.
And I could identify with Edgar Cayce more in his human element. I'm always interested in the human element because I'm so human myself that it gave me hope that I too could transform myself. I would share that if you are interested in looking at this video, that you pursue it more yourself and make up your own mind.
I would say for them to really read into his material and really read about who Edgar Cayce was as a person. Because if you read about his history and the type of person that he was, it's really hard not to want to be a part of such a positive movement. I always had the philosophy that each and every one of us, as we have a soul, has some kind of psychic ability, and it's why when we form close bonds with each other, we're able to kind of pick up on emotions and that kind of stuff. So I was really excited to learn about how I could better develop my psychic ability through the Edgar Cayce readings and the work, and be able to incorporate that into my spirituality also.
Applying this information in your life, you will gain an insight into your soul's purpose and its full potential.
Visit edgarcayce.org.
Okay, we're recording. And once again, thank you so much for participating.
Sure. Yeah.
So we would like to know, how did you find out about Edgar Cayce and the works of Edgar Cayce?
So I found out about Edgar Cayce when I was 17 years old. I was a high school senior, and I was very interested in science, and I was very interested in religion and my church life. And there was a lot of incompatibility in my mind between those two. And one day after school, my sister and I were watching the Mike Douglas TV talk show, an afternoon talk show, kind of like the 1960s version of Oprah, I guess. And Hewlin Cayce and Jess Stern were being interviewed by Mike Douglas that afternoon. And we had never heard of Edgar Cayce. We were enthralled by this description that these two guys were giving. Both my sister and I wanted to read the book, so we went out and bought The Sleeping Prophet. And that led to a long-standing interest for both of us. And my eventually, after finishing high school, getting involved in a study group when I was in college in Houston, Texas.
Perfect. How do you think Cayce's material really changed your life, or if the A.R.E. changed your life in any way?
So I've actually been thinking a lot lately about the impact that Cayce and the readings have had on my life. I'm now in a role, after many years of being a staff member, as a member of the Board of Trustees for A.R.E. and Atlantic University and the Edgar Cayce Foundation. So we do a lot of thinking around sort of long-term vision planning. And the thing that's come to my mind, and it's very personal, but I think it has applicability for others as well, is that the Cayce material's been sort of like a bridge for me. It's helped me to see a bridge between Eastern thought and Western thought, because I still feel very connected to my roots in Protestant Christianity, just as Edgar Cayce had. But he has helped me have a bridge, as he's helped many people have a bridge to meditation and reincarnation and the intuitive mind and some things that really have deeper roots in the East. I think he's also helped me to see a bridge between science and religion. But I, for a long time, saw that as sort of an uncrossable divide. And even though Edgar Cayce wasn't a scientist per se, I think just naming the organization Research and Enlightenment, and just his emphasis on application and testing out ideas to see whether they really work, helped me see how there could be kind of a practical spirituality or a practical kind of religion or a sort of evidence-based, research-based way of going about spirituality in my own life. So he's been a bridge that way. And a third way he's been a bridge for me is just seeing how all the parts of myself are interconnected. That my physical health and my attitudes and emotions and my spiritual ideals, that there's really a bridge amongst all those, that it's not siloed. And so I think the readings have just helped me to be more of a whole person in that way.
Perfect. What do you think was Cayce's most important advice?
So in thinking about all of the readings, and I had a chance to really think about this 15 years ago or so when I was invited to write a book called The Essential, Edgar Cayce. It was published by Random House. And sort of stepping back and asking myself, what did I think is the essence of the Cayce material? And I think it's this sort of implicit formula to envision our spiritual ideal, to awaken and apply our will, and then soul development, soul growth can be the byproduct of that. And so it really puts emphasis on knowing our values, knowing what we believe in, where we put our faith. And alongside then having an ideal is doing something with it. And that really means making use of this tremendous gift of free will and making it healthy. And then what we all aspire to, which is well-being and happiness and connection in life, that kind of soul growth is going to be the result. That little formula to me is at the heart of the teachings.
And our final fun question, did you ever try sleeping on a book to learn the contents the way that little Edgar did?
The story about sleeping on the book's interesting because I think what's been left out of the story sometimes in its telling is that Edgar read the book first and then he slept on it in order to better remember what was in it. And so if the story is taken as some kind of a shortcut where we can just do a little psychic trick and avoid the hard work of learning, then I think we kind of miss the whole emphasis in the reading. So I haven't tried that with a book. I have tried writing a question on a piece of paper and putting it under my pillow and sleeping on it as a kind of dream incubation method where I was trying to invite a dream on a particular question. So the sleeping on something was more sort of a process by which I was inviting my own intuitive wisdom to speak to me through my dream life.
The Cayce readings tell an extraordinary story about how life is meaningful and purposeful, and we're all here on a grand purpose. But then they get even more specific and say that everybody is here on a specific mission, that each of us has come with unique talents and abilities and strengths to contribute something and to grow in a very special way, a very particular life path. And when Edgar Cayce gave life readings to individuals, and there's about 2,000 of them, he wasn't just telling them stories about their past lives, he was helping them see their mission or their purpose for this lifetime. And that's something each one of us can discover for ourselves.
If you want to know what you need to work on in life, look at the people that you keep attracting to you. And if you want to know what you have to work with, look at the positive people in your life, because you can see your own strengths and weaknesses in other people.
I feel that this material gives people a better way of living their lives. It's a philosophy of tolerance and openness and invites people of all backgrounds to come and share and to learn from one another, to find out more about themselves as people.
If you don't apply, you're not going to learn. And if you apply incorrectly, you'll have to correct. And every jot and every tittle has to be accounted for. And we used to sometimes laughingly say, the jots and the tittles are upon us.
Karma is only memory. It is not destiny. One's past merely provides a framework of potentials and probabilities. An individual's free will determines the actual experiences he or she has in the present.
Know that it is not all just to live, not all just to be good, but good for something, that ye may fulfill that purpose for which ye have entered this experience. And that purpose is that ye might know yourself to be yourself, and yet one with the creative forces, or God.
Dreams are given to us for our benefit, to learn from, to grow with.
The dreams as we see that come to the entity are those correlations of the physical with the subconscious forces of the body. And from same there may be gained those truths, those lessons, which, used aright, may be for the development of the body spiritually, mentally, financially.
Hundreds of Cayce readings deal with the subject of dreams and dream interpretation. The dream state is one of self-examination, but it is also much more. A storehouse of all of our wishes, hopes, and memories of past experiences. Dreams can diagnose the cause of physical ailments. They can point out thoughts and emotions that we have perhaps tried to overlook, and they can make suggestions for improving our relationships with others.
Dreams can be a catalyst for change in our lives. They can also be reaffirming that we are headed in the right direction, that they can give us sort of a spiritual upliftment that we might really need at a given time.
Perhaps one of the most significant statements regarding dreams from the Cayce readings is that nothing of significance ever happens to us without it first being foreshadowed in our dreams. Cayce's life story contains many different examples of ESP, such as telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, and retrocognition. Telepathy is also known as mind-to-mind communication. Once, while in Kentucky, Cayce gave a reading for a man in New York. Cayce saw the man smoking a cigar, heard him whistling a particular song, saw him meet with another man about a piece of investment property, and then watched him look over 3 pieces of mail. These events were later verified.
They gave him the suggestion and said, you will have before you the body of so-and-so who was supposed to be in an apartment in New York. He lay there a minute and he says, we do not have the body. Said, he's not here. Said, he's on a bus coming across town. Said, there's been an accident and the traffic's tied up. Said, there's a delay. He'll be here in a few minutes. We'll wait. He lay there for 15 minutes, didn't say a word. And at the end of that time, he says, he's come in now. He proceeded to give the reading. Well, when he said he's come in now, he then got up and went in the other room and called the man on the phone. The man said, that's exactly right. Said, I know I was supposed to be in my apartment, and I was on the way there, and I was on a bus, and there was a lot of traffic, and the bus was late, and I just this minute walked in.
I felt an instant attraction to this man. He seemed so, well, I just trusted him, and I didn't think anything about his readings. When I sat there and listened to it, it was just like any other job of taking dictation. One day during a reading, he said a string of words, so I was wondering whether I should put a dash or comma or just how to word this. And over there asleep on the couch, his eyes closed, he said, put a comma between these. and a few times he did that, and other people learned that it was good to be present for the reading, because if they thought of questions, he would answer them without being asked.
Although the readings discuss major global, political, and social upheavals, they also provide some inspiring insights into humanity's collective future. Cayce predicted that the time would come when every individual would realize their responsibility toward one another, a realization that would change the thought of humankind. During the height of World War II, he saw a united world, a renewed sense of spirituality all over the planet, even in international currency. He predicted an alliance with Russia, freedom out of communism, democracy out of China, and the discovery of Atlantis. To him, these psychic experiences were a natural byproduct of spiritual attunement.
Courtney? Okay. All right. Hi, John.
Hello, Loretto. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. You have been one of our most popular speakers for a while and a big supporter of Edgar Cayce's work. So I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit about how did you find out about Edgar Cayce and what got you interested in the work?
Well, when I started my psychic research, I'm a big advocate for everyone who's listening. I'm a big advocate of how this ability works, the mechanics of how it works. Yes, I could pick up things on people and tell them some things, but how is it working? How does this work? That's when I got into studying about energy centers, auras, colors. And if you are a student, a real student of researching this work and how it happens, how we're all natural, you cannot help but to come across Edgar Cayce's work. So for the people, like if I'm teaching the class and I'll say, how many have heard of Edgar Cayce? I want to see every single hand go up. And if I don't, it means they really haven't done a lot of research into this work themselves. So I came across Edgar Cayce's work during my own discovery and exploration of psychic abilities. And this is way before there was all this stuff on the web. So yeah, so that's how it happened. I just came across him. If you're studying this work, you cannot help to come across his work. You have to.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. And how have the readings and his work changed your life and kind of like the work that you do?
Well, his readings, I've always found his readings fascinating. I went through some of the case histories. I was lucky enough to go into the vault and see the actual readings that he did. So that part alone, first of all, fascinated me, how he would just step out and he would just, this information, and this is back in the 40s, right? I mean, this is before the 40s, before any of this kind of work was out. And I respect him. He was just a normal guy with no medical training. So his readings, all of them were the way, just the ability to do it like that was fascinating to me. But when I see the people that he helped and I read the case histories, working from potatoes to charcoal, I mean, it's amazing. And these are proven cases that have worked, that are still in existence. And so that whole aspect of how he did this and the people that he helped, that fascinated me. And his integrity. Also, I hold at the utmost regard also. But besides all that, besides the readings and studying here, you have to realize too, Edgar Cayce was a man who changed the consciousness of man. That's what fascinated me. And that's why I try to teach my students about him, turn them on to him. I want to reach out to younger people also. They need to know about this man. And so he's never forgotten. Not that I think he ever will be, but I really believe that he changed the way people think about psychic ability. And, you know, no woo-woo, just an ordinary guy. But I really believe he helped change the spiritual consciousness of the planet, of man. I know that's a big statement, but it's, in my opinion, it's true. Yeah,
yes,
I really do
definitely.
believe that.
I mean, it's just fascinating how his topics cover such a big range. You know, the readings cover such a big range of topics. You know, it's not just psychic ability. It's not just meditation. I mean, you're talking about Egypt and Atlantis and, you know, healing and
auras and colors and crystals. And I mean, he basically covered the whole gambit and then some. If anyone wants to know anything about any kind of metaphysics, spirituality, it's a good resource. Any of his work, any of his books, and a lot of the speakers at the A.R.E.
Yes, for sure. So tell me, I have a little bit of a funny question. If you could have a conversation with Edgar Cayce, what would you ask him, or what would you say to him if you could?
No one's ever asked me that. So very clever, very clever. Do I ask about myself, or do I ask about the world, especially just going through COVID? right? I would probably ask him, that's a thinking question.
Yeah.
Wow. I think I would ask how I could help spread his word even more, how I can have even a small part of help raising the consciousness of the planet. Maybe I'm doing that anyways in some small way. I think I would ask questions more about mankind as opposed to myself. I mean, most people think that, well, you have a chance to ask a question about yourself. I think I know who I am and where I'm going. I think I would ask about how can I improve the consciousness and the spirituality of man in these present times. That's what I would ask him. Yeah, I would.
I love that. Yeah. Sometimes I ask questions on our social media about, would you rather have a life reading or a health reading? Would you rather have a conversation with Edgar Cayce or get a reading done? And I always find it fascinating what people have to say about that. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about just your experience overall with the Cayce work?
No, I think the A.R.E, the Association of Research and Enlightenment, the people that work there, Kevin Todeschi, hold him at the highest regard, such a nice guy, very professional. I just love the quality of teachers that you have there. And I love the facility itself, because you cannot help when you're looking at that, when you go to the Edgar Cayce Foundation in Virginia Beach, and you're looking at the place, this is where Edgar Cayce was, right? So that fascinates me, and how through all the troublesome times when they had to close and then open, it wasn't easy. And I got to give credit where credit is due. Not easy keeping an organization, 90 years? What? 9 years. And it's still there. His work is still out there. But I just love going to the place because there's a feel of the place there too, and the staff. So I want to support the place. I want to come back to the place. And I'll always, while I'm in this, well, maybe I'll do it on the other side too, help promote the work of Edgar Cayce, because I really believe that man, that special man, still exists and is around us and can help where the planet is going. I really, really do. And I'd like to see more of him. I want more of him out there. So that's my wish. And that's what I'd like to leave you with, is I'm just looking forward to working again with the Edgar Cayce Foundation, the A.R.E, and all the staff. And I always will. And I will always support them. Yeah.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. That was
and happy celebration. Happy 90th. Happy celebration, everyone. Happy 90th. And thank you. So thank you for asking me to do this. I probably would have just called you and say, can't I come on anyway? So thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to be part of this. Thank you, everyone. And happy 90th. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hello, I'm John Van Auken, one of the directors here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the A.R.E. Have you ever wondered whether there is more to life? Do you know your soul's unique purpose and reason for being on the earth at this time? For nearly 100 years, America's most amazing seer, Edgar Cayce, and the organization that grew from those early beginnings, has been providing tools for personal empowerment and spiritual growth. You can explore issues of body, mind, and spirit within a community of like-minded people. Quarterly, we publish a mystery-revealing magazine titled Venture Inward. Members also have access to an exclusive online membership section with all 14,306 Edgar Cayce readings in a searchable database. Plus, you'll enjoy hours of audio and video materials, including recent events from Virginia Beach and special selections from the archives. We also maintain an extensive health database, online dream interpretation, and a free meditation course.
I always had the philosophy that each and every one of us, as we have a soul, has some kind of psychic ability, and it's why when we form close bonds with each other, we're able to kind of pick up on emotions and that kind of stuff. So I was really excited to learn about how I could better develop my psychic ability through the Edgar Cayce readings and the work.
Join with us and thousands of others who are on this great soul journey.